Can you guys hear me? Hello? Check. Alright, so my name is Kunal. I am going to give a talk on Graph Everything. And I work at Plivo, which is an API platform for telephony related stuff. Hello? Can you hear? Alright. So I work at Plivo. It's an API platform for telecom related stuff. You can build conferencing engines, IVR systems, telephonic marketing campaigns, things like PBX system, all using REST APIs, which is exposed using HTTP. So this is what we do. So with these 4 lines of code, you can provide a to number, you can provide a from, which is the caller ID. The answer URL will have the instructions on how to process the call, and then Plivo.makeCall will just go ahead and make a call. We were a part of Morpheus, which is an incubator in 2011. We were part of Y Combinator in the summer of 2012, and we are backed by the very best and powerful investors in the valley. So, a brief detail of what I'm going to discuss in today's talk. I'll start with what all data we generate at Plivo. I'll talk about the various components which generates data. Then I'll move on to graphite and some of the components in graphite like carbon and Whisper. And I'll end the talk by telling you how to graph this data onto graphs like graphene and using the render URL. These are some of the components used in our cloud infrastructure. So OpenSIPs is a SIP server, OpenSIPs and Camelio. They both do SIP signaling. So SIP is a protocol which is used in telecom a lot. It's used in VoIP. What it basically does is it signals between 2 different calls. It sends out signals of answer, ring, or an hang up. So such events are triggered by OpenSIPs. What Django does is it sits on a web interface. We have Flask generating data. Flask is used for the API part. We have FreeSwitch, which runs on our media servers. FreeSwitch generates data about call quality and the media which is actually flowing in the call. We use Redis for metadata of a call. So details of a live call, let's say a to number or a from number of a call are stored in Redis. Shinken is a monitoring tool, and Tank is a tool written on top of Shinken, which uses Shinken events to trigger failover and spawn instances and failover to a different zone on AWS and stuff like that. Tank is written in Boto. We have events from Homer, which is a SIP capture tool. Homer basically captures all call flows. It will show you a brief detail of how the call went along with the SIP packets, and we use Postgres for our as our DB. So this is one of the call log, okay, and one fine day we wanted to figure out the number of inbound calls happening on a particular day. Okay, so this is the best way to do it. Okay, and this is not scalable though, right? You can do this on one file, you can do this on 2 files, but finding out patterns between different days, finding out patterns between weeks and months is not possible. So with this, we figured out that we wanted to track a whole lot of things apart from inbound calls. We wanted to track SMSs made every hour. We wanted to track recharges made in the system versus the signups. We wanted to track the endpoint registered on our system. We wanted to figure out which mode of transport is better, WebRTC or soft phones. We wanted to figure out server metrics, so CPU usage and memory usage of servers, and how they are affecting calls. So this led us to use Graphite. So Graphite is this enterprise scale tool which is used to generate graphs and collect events. Okay, so this was developed by this guy called Chris Davis in this company called Orbitz back in 2006. It was open sourced in 2008, and Chris is still actively contributing to Graphite on GitHub. Okay, so this is what Graphite does. Okay, it stores numeric time series data. It accepts data in a number of protocols, and with each timestamp, it stores a data value. I'm going to talk more about it in detail. And it renders graphs of this data on demand. So it doesn't store the graph. You just pass a URL with the parameters and it will generate a graph for you on demand. So this is the Graphite architecture in a nutshell. Okay. There is a carbon daemon which acts as a listener. So all it does is it listens to data on a particular port. So any application, any sort of software can send data to this through a network port. Whisper is a simple database. It's a fixed size database. It's a file form of a database, and it stores this data which it receives from Carbon. And finally, the Graphite web app, which is a web app which renders these graphs using a module called Cairo. So, carbon daemons. Usually, in a Graphite kind of a setup, we have one carbon daemon. All it does is it listens to time series data over a set of protocols. So, some common set of protocols are, 0MQ. Then there is Pickle, and then there is plain text protocol, which is just sending data as text. Carbon Cache works in the background, and it does a pretty good job of saving this data which it receives to disk, and it does it pretty efficiently. It actually stores it in RAM first, and then based on the configuration files, it writes them to disk. Carbon.conf accepts a few parameters called port, protocols, and transport. So you can specify a port on which you want to listen to data. You can specify a protocol like Pickle or a new line delimited, and then you can specify transport as well. Storage schema is a configuration file which Carbon Cache uses. It specifies a retention policy for that data. So let's say you want to store data for 1 day. You can specify, there's a common regex pattern which you can specify there. I'm going to talk more about that. So this is a basic rule in storage schema. It's a 3-line rule. It starts with the name of the schema, which is plew outbound calls here. It has a pattern which is a regular expression. So it will accept plew outbound calls. It will accept all patterns which end with plew outbound calls. And there's a retention line. So this particular rule will accept any metric of the form p1.plew outbound calls. So if it ends with plew outbound calls, it will accept this metric and store it to Whisper. However, plew outbound calls at sudo won't be accepted. The retention line states that each data point represents 10 seconds, and we want to keep data points for about a 14-day period. Carbon Relay is another software component in Graphite. It's basically used in replication and sharding. So when you start scaling, you need more carbon daemons. This sits on top of these carbon daemons, and based on the relay methods, it makes sure it shards data appropriately. So there are two relay methods here, rules and consistent hashing. Rules is a relay method where you specify rules for a metric. So if you want to say outbound call goes to this particular daemon, that'll be rule. Consistent hashing based on a hash. You specify a hash, and based on that hash, it will go to different daemons. Feeding in your data. Carbon accepts data in these three basic protocols. So they are plain text, Pickle, and AMQP. plain text is pretty trivial. You specify data format data in this particular format. So let's say you want to send outbound calls to a Graphite server. You'll say cleave outbound calls which is the metric path. You'll put a value there which is 4, and then you will have a timestamp. So this particular data goes into Graphite, matched with the timestamp you provide. Pickle is much more efficient than plain text, and it supports batches of metrics. What Pickle does is it will collect data in a sort of a list and then send it, as a major component. So if you don't want to do real-time graphing, this is the best way to do it. It accepts data in that particular format, so it needs a header of exclamation L and then the payload length. Whisper is, like I said, a fixed size database, and it is used for long-term retention and reliable storage of numeric data. It only accepts numeric data, it does not accept characters. So with every timestamp, there's a data associated, and that's what it stores. Whisper is much more efficient because it does not only save particular timestamp data, it makes sure that other timestamps are not stored. So if there's no data for a particular timestamp, there won't be any field in Whisper. Whisper aggregation. So when you want to do something like collapse multiple data points, that's when you use Whisper aggregation. So let's say you have a whole day's data of recharges, and you want to figure out what the total number of recharges happened today. That's when you'll use a method sum. So you'll sum the recharges together, and then you'll figure out the total recharge amount happened that day. Some of the other examples are like figuring out the highest time period of a call happened in a particular day. That's when you'll use max. It uses average aggregation by default, and it can be set in the Whisper configuration files. Whisper saves each data point with a timestamp. It also archives time periods, so you don't have to worry about archiving it yourself. It does it on its own. And all time slots take up space. So all time slots of data versus time period will take up space in Whisper. So Graphite is as easy as doing a pip install Graphite web. You can go ahead and install it, and it creates the Graphite server. It will also create the Carbon daemon. You need to go and configure Carbon, and then which is a default at 2003 port, and start sending data to Graphite. I'm going to talk about the render URL API, which is an API to generate graphs. So this is the interesting part. You have a gUnicorn process running on API server 1 and a gUnicorn process running on API server 2 as well. And then you want to get metrics of CPU load. Okay, and from now for the past 24 hours. So if you provide this to Graphite, if you put this in the browser and run it on a Graphite server, you'll get this sort of a graph. And this sort of a graph helps us debug in, call quality issues. Like you can see Monday 11 PM, the load on CPU, the load on API 2 was pretty high. CPU was almost touching 15%. Graphite also exposes a JSON URL, which is, it will give out data in JSON. So there are all these third-party libraries like Graphene, which is written in D3.js, which can be used with this JSON output to actually render a graph. So I was talking about Graphene. Graphene will accept a Graphite URL. You just need to provide a Graphite URL to the source, and it will generate graphs on its own. It also accepts a lot of other parameters like the parent graph, if you want to generate a sophisticated kind of a graphing system, it will accept a parent element and a title which you can give. So this is what we finally came up with. These are the graphs which we generated using Graphite. So this is the revenue of a particular user, how it built up, and that is the call usage on a particular day. So we can start, looking at patterns of how call, usage increases as the day progresses. So okay, to summarize, we have a whole lot of components like Homer, OpenSips, Shinken, Django, FreeSwitch, Redis. They all send data to Graphite, and they do this using a common set of protocols. Django sends data like recharges or user signups or things like endpoints created or applications created. FreeSwitch sends data like invites or the quality of a call. Shinken sends us data of server uptime and does monitoring too. OpenSips, again, it sends us a lot of SIP data, and Homer sends us data related to SIP too. So Graphite gets all this data, it aggregates it, makes sure it's put into Whisper, and finally it exposes data in terms of JSON, which we put it on graphs. Right, thank you. And we are hiring currently. We're looking for great roles like product engineers and telecom engineers, also JavaScript front end and infrastructure too. So if you're looking for any kind of jobs, just approach our booth. Thank you.
Any questions?
Hello, I'm Nilesh from Dubizzle.com. I have worked something on about this like Graphite. I just want to know like how you are doing this real-time data traffic analysis using Graphite, because like Graphite doesn't support real-time traffic data analysis, right?
So we do that using Graphene, right? Graphene keeps reloading data, right? And Graphene, you can trigger a reload. You can have a reload configuration there, which can keep reloading data from Graphite. So it pings that Graphite URL, it accesses data from there.
So like, are you generating data points on the live site, and then how you're sending it? You're sending using Graphite these data points to Graphite database, to the Whisper?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
So we actually send data through Carbon, right? So Carbon is the one which is listening to this data.
Your Carbon is a daemon who listens it and then send it to Whisper.
Yeah, channels it to Whisper based on the configuration.
Okay. And like, what is this fixed size DB in the
fixed
Whisper?
size DB is you specify a size beforehand. Okay, make sure you have a particular size and then create a Whisper DB.
Like the size will always be the same.
So you can actually increase the size too later on.
Okay, but like we define the size.
Yeah.
Somewhere. Okay. Cool. And one more thing was there. Yeah, this AMQP protocol.
Mm-hmm.
Like when we use AMQP protocol.
I still haven't researched on it yet, but AMQP protocol will probably be used in high scale, huge scale infrastructures where there are lots of components involved in sending data.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
We use Asterix, not Asterix. How different is Asterix from Pilivo is the first question.
Asterix is pretty old, right? And it's
but Pilivo is based on the architecture of Asterix, right?
no. So we use FreeSwitch. We don't use Asterix. So FreeSwitch is another soft switch, which is like much better than Asterix. And actually, we feel it's much better than Asterix, and we went with FreeSwitch. That's it. It scales pretty well too.
Sorry, didn't hear that last part.
It scales pretty well too. FreeSwitch scales really well.
So what's the big difference between Graphite and other graphing tools, like maybe for MRTG or RRD, for instance?
So Graphite is Python's take on graphing, right? So it's written in Python. It's easy to maintain. Okay, so it's written in Python and easy to maintain, right? And RRD tool is you will need some kind of a daemon to actually send data to RRD tool. Right? And Graphite is a package of Carbon and Whisper. Okay. There's this project by Chris. Okay, it's called Series. Okay, Series is ultimately going to replace Whisper in the coming versions. So Series is much better version of Whisper and RRD tool.
And then, so RRD, but then RRD is supposed to be actually faster than WhisperDB, right?
RRD is much faster. Yes, it is much faster than WhisperDB since it's written in C.
So the newer DB that you're talking about, will it actually be comparatively faster, or like will it be comparable to RRD?
Sorry, I didn't get you.
So the new DB that you're talking about, so will it be comparable in terms of speed to RRD?
Yes, I think so.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah, you mentioned that the graphs are generated in real time, right? And you said that whatever you're using, Graphite and all that, it has a feature of archiving. So does that mean that you can say data that was say generated 3 years or 4 years back, can you on demand or whenever needed generate a graph for it again?
Yes, it will.
Okay.
So when you actually query that URL, it will fetch the data from the DB and generate a graph for it.
And what basically is the format that this thing uses? Is it SVG or?
Yeah, it is SVG. So if you're using Graphite, it's SVG. You can use Graphene, which is JavaScript. It's D3 based. And since Graphite provides data in the form of JSON too, Graphene will just use it out of the box.
And other than JSON, is there any other format that we can use for storing the data?
For storing the data?
As in like JSON, you'd be having certain key value pair kind of thing, right? In JSON, as in you.
No, so data is not stored in JSON.
Okay.
The output is in JSON.
So you find the output. So can the output be stored in any other format other than JSON?
Not really aware of any.
Okay.
How are you collecting data from other servers?
So collecting the data is sent to Graphite, right? It's not collecting. So
yeah, I mean
all these servers have a module which will on an event will send data to Graphite.
So I mean, what is the client side software? I mean, how it sends that event?
I didn't get you.
How does it sense that event? I mean,
it uses the plain text protocol, and some servers use the pickle protocol. So there are these two protocols, the main ones. One is plain text, which you just send it out to a port. Again, the port on which Carbon is listening to. Okay, Carbon will accept that data based on the configuration files and store it in Whisper. And then there is pickle format, which is like a combination of data sent as a whole, as a bunch to Graphite.
What is the retention period? You use it with the Blue.
So retention period, we usually have 1 month. Okay, so
I can't get you.
We store data every day. Okay, and based on different servers store in different patterns, right? Different retention periods. So we store data almost every day, and we have a 1 month retention period. So after every month, we aggregate it based on those aggregate functions, and we store that in Whisper again. We do it using TCP. No, so this is like an event. So we have a separate server listening to these events, and then that server. So it's not a synchronous operation. It's not a synchronous operation from the main service.
Okay.
It stores it as it stores that it's like a publish subscribe thing. So you send an event to a listener,
okay,
and that guy will ping Carbon with the TCP socket.
Okay, so something like middleware kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly.
But that's what I think someone was trying to ask you. So like statsd, collectd, these kind of things. Okay. So those handle aggregation for you.
Yes.
Right. And one more thing, you said for Whisper aggregation, you said when you want data for a day, then it aggregates for you. So it's not that thing. What I have read is when it is collapsing the data, like you have written the retention policy as 10 second for one day and like 50 second for 1 week, something like that. So while doing that, while truncating the data, it applies those policy.
Yes, while truncating data, when the retention period is achieved, it will truncate the data using the aggregate mechanism, and based on your aggregate function, it will store the data.
Yeah, that's what.
We have custom middleware. Certain, sorry? Yeah, so we weren't aware of the systems back when we coded this. So it's a pretty easy middleware, it's very simple. Yes.
hello, check, hello, hello.
Hello, check, 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 check. One, hello, hello, check, check, hello, check, 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 check.
Hello, hello, check, check, hello, check, hello, check, check, hello, hello, check, check, hello, hello, check, hello, check, check, hello, hello.